Marcus had always been known as the quiet architect of his own destiny, a man whose life was built on careful planning and unwavering principles. His colleagues often joked that he approached both his architectural designs and his relationships with the same meticulous attention to detail, leaving no stone unturned. But no amount of planning could have prepared him for the moment his wife of 12 years would present him with an ultimatum that would shatter the foundation of everything he had built. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Life had always been a series of well-calculated moves. For Marcus Chen, at 38, he had established himself as one of Seattle's most respected residential architects, known for creating homes that perfectly balanced functionality with emotional comfort. His own home, a modern craftsman he had designed himself in the quiet suburbs of Kirkland, stood as a testament to his philosophy that every strong structure needed a solid foundation. The same principles guided his marriage to Diana. They had met in graduate school at the University of Washington, where her vibrant personality and creative spirit as an interior designer perfectly complemented his more methodical approach. Together, they had built what others saw as an ideal partnership, both personally and professionally, often collaborating on high-end residential projects that merged their distinct styles. Their daughter, Emma, now 10, inherited Diana's artistic flair and Marcus's analytical mind, excelling both in art class and mathematics. Every Sunday morning, Marcus and Emma would sit at their kitchen island, working on architectural sketches together, while Diana prepared her famous blueberry pancakes. These moments of domestic tranquility were what Marcus treasured most. Professional success had come steadily for both of them. Marcus's firm, Chen Residential Design, had grown from a solo practice to a boutique agency with 15 employees. Diana had recently been promoted to creative director at Wellington Interiors, one of the city's most prestigious design firms. Their life seemed to be following the perfect blueprint they had drawn together. But like any architect knew, sometimes the most dangerous cracks were the ones hidden beneath the surface. The first hairline fractures appeared when Diana's new position brought her into regular contact with James Wellington, the charismatic owner of her firm. A self-made millionaire with a reputation for aggressive expansion and acquisition, James was everything Marcus wasn't: bold, impulsive, and unbound. By conventional rules, Marcus noticed subtle changes in Diana's behavior. The Sunday morning pancakes became less frequent, replaced by early meetings and client consultations. Her phone would light up at odd hours with urgent work messages. Her wardrobe evolved from professional elegance to something more deliberately eye-catching. She began arriving home later, citing project deadlines and team dinners. Marcus's closest friend and legal counsel, Nathan Park, had tried to warn him during their weekly basketball games. "Something's off with Diana," Nathan would say, but Marcus had dismissed his concerns. He trusted Diana implicitly, believing their foundation was too strong to be shaken by temporary changes in routine. His sister May, always the more perceptive sibling, noticed too. During their monthly family dinners, she watched how Diana's attention seemed to drift, how her laughs at family jokes became more forced, how she spent more time on her phone than engaging with Emma's stories about school. "A house can look perfect from the outside," May had said one evening while helping Marcus with the dishes, "but that doesn't mean the internal structure isn't compromised." Marcus had smiled at her use of architectural metaphors, but filed away her concern alongside Nathan's warnings. Even Emma, perceptive beyond her years, sensed the shift in their household's atmosphere. She began spending more time in Marcus's home office after school, drawing quietly while he worked, as if anchoring herself to the parent who remained constant and present. Looking back, Marcus would later recognize these moments as the preliminary. The survey of a site before a major fault line revealed itself. All the signs were there. The changing patterns, the emotional distance, the subtle shifts in priority. But like many who are too close to a situation, he couldn't see the complete structural failure that was coming. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday. Marcus was reviewing plans for a sustainable housing project while Emma got ready for school. Diana had already left for an early client meeting, something that had become increasingly common over the past few months. What Marcus didn't know then was that this ordinary Tuesday would become the day his carefully constructed life would face its greatest structural test. The foundation he had built his family upon was about to be shaken by an ultimatum that would force him to either compromise his principles or demolish everything and start again. As he helped Emma pack her backpack, checking that she had everything for her science presentation, Marcus was still operating under the assumption that every problem had a logical solution, that every structural weakness could be reinforced with proper planning and execution. By nightfall, this fundamental belief in orderly solutions would be challenged in ways he never imagined possible. The text message came at 2:47 p.m. "We need to talk tonight. It's important." Diana's message was unusually formal, lacking her typical emojis or warmth. Marcus felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest as he read it, the same instinctive unease he experienced when discovering a critical design flaw in final blueprints. He left the office early, telling his project manager Sarah to handle the client. Meeting scheduled for 4 p.m. The drive home through Seattle's rain-slicked streets gave him too much time to think. Emma would be at her weekly advanced art class until 7 p.m., which meant Diana had deliberately chosen a time when they could be alone. Their house, his pride and joy with its clean lines and warm wood accents, felt different as he pulled into the driveway. Diana's Tesla was already there, unusually early for her recent schedule. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows he had specifically designed to flood the living room with natural light. He could see her pacing, phone pressed to her ear. She ended the call abruptly when his key turned in the lock. "You're home early," Diana said, her voice carrying a forced casualness that didn't match her rigid posture. She had changed from her work clothes into yoga pants and one of her expensive cashmere sweaters, her comfort uniform, Marcus noted, the outfit she wore when preparing for difficult conversations. "Your message seemed urgent," Marcus replied, hanging his coat in the mudroom he had meticulously designed for Seattle's wet weather. "Is everything okay?" Diana gestured toward the kitchen island, the heart of their home, where they had shared countless family meals and helped Emma with homework. Now it felt like a negotiation table, with Diana choosing to sit across from him rather than in her usual spot at his side. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Diana began, her manicured fingers tracing the grain of the walnut countertop he had personally selected. "About us, about marriage, about what we both need to be happy." Marcus felt his architect's instinct kick in, the ability to see structural problems before they became catastrophic failures. "Go on," he said, his voice steady despite the growing earthquake he could feel approaching. "We've been together for 12 years, Marcus. You've given me stability, security, a beautiful home, and our amazing Emma." She paused, and Marcus recognized the verbal architecture of bad news, the foundation of compliments before the wrecking ball. "But I feel stuck, limited, like I'm living in one of your perfectly designed houses, but all the windows are sealed shut." The metaphor stung, precisely because she knew it would. Marcus remained silent, watching as she pulled an iPad from her designer bag. "I've been reading about modern approaches to marriage," Diana continued, her voice taking on the same tone she used when pitching design concepts to clients. about how relationships can evolve, adapt to changing needs. There's this growing movement of couples who've found that traditional monogamy doesn't have to be the only blueprint for a successful marriage. The word hit Marcus like a physical blow. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Are you talking about an open marriage?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Diana's face brightened with what looked like relief, as if his understanding had somehow made this easier. "Yes, exactly. It's not about replacing what we have, it's about expanding it, adding new dimensions to our relationship. We could both explore connections with others while maintaining our family unit. It's quite common in progressive circles. Now," Marcus felt the room spin slightly, his architect's mind automatically calculating load-bearing weights and stress factors. "How long have you been considering this?" Diana shifted in her seat, her confidence wavering for the first time. "A few months. James, Mr. Wellington, he and his wife have this arrangement. They're both so much happier now, free to pursue their individual desires while still providing a stable home for their children." The mention of James Wellington made everything click into place. The late meetings, the changed wardrobe, the constant phone checks. The blueprint of betrayal became crystal clear. "How long have you been sleeping with him?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying the same calm precision he used when identifying critical structural failures. Diana's face flushed, then paled. That's not... This isn't about James. This is about us, about finding a modern solution to natural human desires. Answer the question, Diana." She stood up abruptly, pacing the kitchen in agitation. "This is exactly why we need to have this conversation. You're so rigid, so black and white about everything. Life isn't one of your perfect architectural plans, Marcus. Sometimes people need more than one support beam in their lives." "How long?" Marcus repeated, each word carved in ice. Diana stopped pacing, her shoulders slumping in defeat. 2 months, she whispered. "But it wasn't planned. It just happened. And it made me realize that maybe there's a way to have everything. Our family, our home, and the excitement of new connections." Marcus stood slowly, his hands flat on the counter to steady himself. "So let me understand this perfectly," he said, his professional precision cutting through the chaos. "You've been having an affair with your boss for 2 months, and now you want my permission to continue it under the guise of an open marriage?" "It's not like that," Diana protested. "James and we have a connection, but I love you, Marcus. I love our life. I just need more than this perfectly ordered existence you've built." James suggested that if we approach this openly, honestly... "James suggested?" Marcus's laugh was hollow. "Of course he did. Tell me, in this modern arrangement he's proposing, would he be equally comfortable with his wife entertaining other men? Or is this open marriage conveniently designed to justify his affair with you?" Diana's silence was all the answer he needed. The perfect structure of their marriage, the one he had spent 12 years building, reinforcing and maintaining, wasn't just cracking, it had been systematically undermined from within. "I'll make this very simple," Marcus said, his voice carrying the finality of a condemned building's demolition order. "You have 24 hours to tell James Wellington's wife about your affair, or I will. And Diana, start looking for a new job, because your position at Wellington Interiors is about to become extremely uncomfortable." The color drained from Diana's face. "You wouldn't dare. James would what?" Marcus's smile was architectural in its precision, carefully designed to convey exactly what he intended. "Deny it? Fire you? Try to destroy my business?" One call to the Seattle Business Journal about Wellington Interior's pattern of workplace. Harassment would be very interesting, especially given the current social climate. "This isn't you, Marcus," Diana whispered. You don't threaten people. You don't destroy things. You're right, he replied, gathering his keys. I build things. But every architect knows that sometimes before you can build something new, you have to demolish what's broken beyond repair. I'm picking up Emma from art class. When we return, I expect you to have decided whether you're going to tell Mrs. Wellington or if I need to do it myself. As Marcus walked out of the house he had designed with such care, he felt the weight of its perfection fall away. Sometimes, he realized, the most important structural element in any design wasn't the foundation or the walls. It was the courage to recognize when a complete demolition was the only way forward. In the immediate aftermath of Diana's revelation, Marcus discovered that the true strength of a support system isn't visible until the primary structure begins to fail. While driving to pick up Emma from her art class, his hands steady on the wheel, despite the internal tremors, he called his sister May. I need you to take Emma tonight, he said without preamble. May, who had built her pediatric practice on understanding both what was said and unsaid, heard the controlled chaos in his voice. Of course, she replied instantly. Should I ask why or wait until you're ready? Diana asked for an open marriage to cover her affair with James Wellington, Marcus said, the words feeling strange in his mouth, like reciting measurements in a foreign language. I need to handle this without Emma in the blast radius. May's sharp intake of breath was followed by a string of Mandarin curses their mother would have grounded her for. Bring her over. Stay too if you need to. No, Marcus replied, pulling into the art school's parking lot. I need to be home when Diana makes her choice, but Emma shouldn't be there for what comes next, regardless of what she decides. Emma bounded into the car with her usual enthusiasm, her portfolio clutched to her chest. Dad, Mrs. Chen taught us about perspective today, and I think I finally got it right. Her excitement, so pure and untouched by adult complications, made Marcus's heart ache. That's wonderful, sweetheart, he managed, forcing warmth into his voice. How about you show your drawings to Aunt May? She's excited for you to spend the night. Emma's face lit up. Sleepovers at Aunt May's were a special treat, complete with secret ice cream runs and staying up late watching Studio Ghibli movies. She didn't question the sudden change in plans, though Marcus caught her studying his face in the rearview mirror with an awareness that reminded him too much of himself. After dropping Emma off, Marcus made his second call of the evening. This time to Nathan Park. His friend answered on the first ring, probably still at his law office despite the late hour. I need everything you have on employment law regarding workplace relationships, sexual harassment precedents, and how they intersect with divorce proceedings, Marcus said, using the same tone he used when requesting structural analysis reports. Nathan's response was immediate and professional. Give me context. As Marcus outlined the situation, he could hear Nathan's keyboard clicking in the background, already pulling relevant cases and statutes. Diana's ultimatum is essentially an admission of the affair, Nathan noted, but we need to document everything. Forward me all communications, especially any mentions of James Wellington. And Marcus, don't delete anything, even if it hurts. To look at every text, every email, every credit card statement. It's all potential evidence. What's my next move? Marcus asked, parked outside his house but not yet ready to go in. Don't leave the house, Nathan advised. In divorce proceedings, abandonment can be used against you. Document everything from this point forward. If Diana moves out, that's her choice. If she stays, maintain your routine, but keep records of all interactions. Start a detailed journal now, times, dates, conversations. And Marcus, install security cameras. Today, the mention of cameras triggered Marcus's professional instincts. As an architect, he knew every angle of his home, every optimal position for surveillance. He made a quick stop at a nearby electronics store, purchasing a comprehensive security system with both indoor and outdoor coverage. Returning home, he found Diana still there, pacing the living room with her phone pressed to her ear. She ended the call abruptly when he entered, her face a mask of controlled panic. "Where's Emma?" she demanded. "Safe with May," Marcus replied, beginning to unpack the security equipment. "Away from whatever fallout comes next." Diana watched him work, her composure cracking slightly. "What are you doing?" "Installing security cameras," he answered, his voice professionally neutral. "Standard procedure in high-conflict situations. Nathan's advice." "You told Nathan?" Her voice rose sharply. "This is private, Marcus. Between us." "No, Diana," he corrected, her testing the angle of the first camera. "You made it between us, James Wellington, his wife, your workplace, and potentially the courts. Privacy stopped being an option when you decided to turn our marriage into a negotiation." The next few hours passed in a tense dance of avoidance. Diana alternated between making phone calls in whispered tones from various rooms and attempting to engage Marcus in further discussion about her proposed arrangement. Marcus methodically installed cameras, documented their positions, and began a detailed journal of the day's events on his laptop. At 11:42 p.m., Diana finally broke the silence with force. "This isn't fair, Marcus. You're treating me like a criminal, when all I did was be honest about my feelings." Marcus looked up from his laptop, where he'd been documenting her phone calls. "Honest? Let's examine that claim with the same precision you want me to apply to your open marriage proposal. You started an affair with your married boss, continued it for 2 months, while lying to me daily, and only suggested opening our marriage when it became too difficult to maintain your deception. Does that summary align with your definition of honesty?" "You're twisting everything." Diana's composure shattered completely. "James and I have a real connection. He understands me in ways you never have. This doesn't have to destroy our family. We can adapt, evolve. Why are you being so rigid?" "Because some things don't bend, Diana. They either hold true or they break." Marcus closed his laptop with deliberate care. "You have about 14 hours left to make your decision about informing Mrs. Wellington. Choose wisely." Diana's face contorted with a mixture of fear and defiance. "And if I refuse?" "If I tell James about your threats, then a comprehensive record of your affair, including credit card statements, phone records, and your admission tonight, will be in Mrs. Wellington's hands by noon tomorrow. I'm sure the board of directors at Wellington Interiors will also be very interested in how their CEO conducts his personal business." "You would destroy my career? After 12 years of marriage?" Marcus stood, gathering his laptop. "No, Diana. You destroyed your career the moment you decided to sleep with your boss. I'm simply refusing to be complicit in covering it up. I'll be in my office. Whatever you decide, remember that Emma deserves better than to learn about integrity from parents who compromise their principles." As he climbed the stairs to his home office, Marcus heard Diana's phone ring again. James Wellington's ringtone. He closed the door, opened his journal, and began documenting the time and content of their conversation. The architect in him knew that the most important phase of any demolition was keeping precise records of what was being torn down and why. The night stretched ahead, full of difficult decisions and painful revelations. But Marcus had spent his career learning that the strongest structures were built on unwavering foundations. Tonight would test what remained of his foundation and determine what could be built from the ruins. The next morning dawned with the kind of crisp clarity that Seattle rarely offered in autumn. Marcus had spent most of the night in his home office, methodically building a case that would prove more damaging than Diana could imagine. Years of managing complex architectural projects had taught him the value of thorough documentation, and now those skills served a different purpose. Through careful analysis of their joint credit card statements, Marcus uncovered a pattern that spoke volumes. Diana's business dinners at upscale restaurants like Canlis and Metropolitan Grill coincided perfectly with James Wellington's known calendar. Information Marcus gleaned from Wellington Interior's public social media posts. Hotel charges, disguised as client consultations, appeared with increasing frequency over the past 2 months. The financial blueprint of betrayal was clear and damning, but the real breakthrough came at 3:47 a.m. when Marcus remembered something crucial. As part of his firm's recent project designing Wellington Interior's new downtown office, he had been given access to their internal scheduling system. The access should have been revoked months ago, but corporate IT departments were seldom as efficient as they should be. A quick login confirmed his suspicions. Diana and James had blocked out identical private consultation times in their calendars, often in 2-hour blocks at odd times of the day. Nathan called early, his voice carrying the sharp edge of someone who had also spent the night working. "I've got something you need to see," he said without preamble. "Remember that intern who left Wellington Interiors suddenly last year, Sarah Mitchell? She's willing to talk." Marcus put the call on speaker as he continued compiling evidence. "About Wellington?" "About a pattern," Nathan replied. "Turns out your wife isn't the first married employee he's pursued. Sarah documented everything before she left. Inappropriate advances, suggestive emails, even recordings of him suggesting her promotion prospects would improve if she was more open-minded about their relationship. Where is she now? Working for a competitor in Portland. She signed an NDA when she left, but she's willing to break it if other victims come forward. And Marcus? She's not the only one. I've identified 3 more former employees with similar stories." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his architect's mind automatically constructing a timeline of Wellington's predatory behavior. "How long have you been sitting on this information?" "I started digging the moment you mentioned Wellington 3 months ago," Nathan admitted. "Something about him felt off when we met at the office design consultation. I've been quietly building a file ever since." "Forward me everything," Marcus instructed. "And Nathan, thank you for seeing the warning signs I missed." The sound of the front door closing downstairs caught Marcus's attention. Diana had spent the night in the guest room, and now he could hear her moving around the kitchen. The security cameras he'd installed showed her making coffee, her movements jerky with tension. "She's up," Marcus told Nathan. "Time to see what she decided." "Remember," Nathan cautioned, "everything she says could be relevant later. Record everything." Marcus descended the stairs with measured steps, his laptop under his arm, containing what he now thought of as the demolition plans for James Wellington's carefully constructed public image. Diana stood at the kitchen island, their usual spot, for family breakfasts, now transformed into neutral territory. "Have you made your decision?" Marcus asked, setting up his laptop and pressing record on the security camera software. Diana looked up from her coffee, her usual polished appearance, showing signs of strain. "You're really going to do this? Risk everything we've built because you can't accept that relationships evolve?" "That's not an answer," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the same patience he used when explaining complex structural requirements to clients. "Will you be telling Mrs. Wellington about the affair, or should I?" "James says you're bluffing." Diana shot back. "He says no judge would look favorably on someone who deliberately tries to destroy their spouse's career during divorce proceedings." Marcus opened his laptop, turning the screen toward Diana. "Interesting perspective. Let's examine the evidence I've compiled in the last 8 hours. Credit card statements showing your joint expenses, hotel receipts, calendar entries. But the most interesting part?" He clicked to a new document. "Statements from other women James Wellington has pursued at the company. Would you like to know how many signed NDAs before leaving?" The color drained from Diana's face. "You're lying. James would never—" "Sarah Mitchell," Marcus cut in. "Remember her? The intern who left suddenly last year, she recorded some very interesting conversations with James about how to advance her career. Would you like to hear them? Or should we discuss Amanda Torres or perhaps Jennifer Wu? Diana's coffee cup clattered against the counter. Stop it. This isn't about our marriage anymore, Diana. This is about a predator who has been using his position to manipulate women for years. You're just the latest in a pattern. Marcus's voice softened slightly. The only difference is, you have a choice about how this ends. He'll deny everything, Diana whispered, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. Of course he will, Marcus agreed, right up until the moment the evidence becomes public. How do you think the board of directors will react to multiple harassment claims in this climate? How many other women will come forward once the story breaks? Diana sank onto a bar stool, her composure crumbling. You don't understand. James, he has influence. He could make sure I never work in design again. No, Diana, he has the illusion of influence, built on secrecy and fear. The moment that secrecy breaks, his power evaporates. Marcus pulled up another document. I've spent the night preparing 2 press releases. The first is your public statement about ending your relationship with Wellington Interiors due to James Wellington's inappropriate conduct. The second is my statement to the board about his pattern of predatory behavior, accompanied by evidence from multiple victims. You've really thought of everything, haven't you? Diana's voice carried a mixture of bitterness and dawning respect. That's what architects do, Marcus replied simply. We anticipate problems and design solutions. The question is, Diana, are you going to be part of the solution or part of the problem that needs to be solved? Diana stared at her coffee for a long moment before reaching for her phone. With trembling fingers, she pulled up a contact and pressed call. The phone rang 3 times before a woman's voice answered. Mrs. Wellington, this is Diana Chen from your husband's company. We need to talk. Marcus opened his journal and began documenting the conversation, watching as another carefully constructed facade began to crumble. Sometimes, he reflected, the only way to build something truly strong was to first expose every hidden weakness, no matter how painful the process might be. The aftermath of Diana's call to Mrs. Wellington unfolded like a controlled demolition, each revelation triggering a new cascade of consequences. Within hours, the carefully maintained public image of James Wellington began to show its first visible fractures. Victoria Wellington, as it turned out, had harbored her own suspicions about her husband's behavior. A shrewd businesswoman in her own right, she had quietly gathered evidence of his indiscretions over the years, biding her time until the right moment presented itself. Diana's confession wasn't just confirmation. It was the catalyst Victoria had been waiting for. She thanked me, Diana said numbly, sitting in Marcus's home office later that day. She actually thanked me for coming forward. The irony of seeking refuge in the same room where Marcus had spent the night building a case against her wasn't lost on either of them. Marcus maintained his professional distance, recording every detail of the unfolding events in his journal. What exactly did she say? That I wasn't the first, but I could help make sure I was the last. Diana's hands trembled as she reached for the glass of water on his desk. She has recordings, Marcus. Years of them. Security footage from their home showing different women arriving when she was supposed to be out of town. Bank statements showing payments to people who signed NDAs. She's been documenting everything. The architect in Marcus appreciated the methodical nature of Victoria Wellington's preparation. Smart woman. She's already called her lawyers, Diana continued, her voice hollow. They're drawing up divorce papers right now. And Marcus, she sits on the board of Wellington Interiors. She owns 30% of the company's shares. It was her family's money that helped start the business. Marcus nodded, adding this information to his growing file. What about James? Have you heard from him? As if on cue, Diana's phone buzzed with an incoming call. James Wellington's name flashed on the screen. She stared at it, frozen, until Marcus spoke quietly but firmly. Put it on speaker. Everything needs to be documented. Diana's hand shook as she answered the call. James's voice filled the room, its usual smooth confidence replaced by barely controlled panic. "What the hell did you do?" he demanded. "Victoria's lawyers just served me with divorce papers. They're talking about a forensic audit of the company finances. This is your fault." "My fault," Diana's voice cracked. "You told me your marriage was essentially over. You said Victoria understood that you had arrangements. You lied to me, James." "Don't be naive, Diana. You knew exactly what this was. And now you've ruined everything because you couldn't handle a simple arrangement with your husband. I trusted you to manage this." Marcus watched as Diana's face transformed, the last illusions about James Wellington shattering before his eyes. "No, James, you didn't trust me. You manipulated me, just like you manipulated Sarah Mitchell and Amanda Torres and all the others. How many were there? How many women did you promise to mentor before suggesting they could advance faster if they were more open to your advances?" There was a moment of stunned silence before James's voice turned cold. "Who have you been talking to? If you think you can threaten me, I'm not threatening you, James. I'm done. I've already sent my resignation letter to HR. Victoria has everything. The hotel receipts, the calendar entries, the recordings. It's over." "You stupid bitch," James snarled, his cultivated facade completely crumbling. "I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. No design firm in Seattle will touch you after I'm done. Your career is over." Marcus chose this moment to speak, his calm voice cutting through James's tirade. "Mr. Wellington, this is Marcus Chen. I should inform you that this conversation is being recorded, and threats of professional retaliation are actionable under state law. Would you like to rephrase your last statement?" The silence that followed was deafening. When James spoke again, his voice was tight with suppressed rage. "Marcus, always the careful architect, aren't you? Planning everything out, documenting every detail. Did you enjoy dismantling my life so methodically?" "Actually, James, you did that yourself. I just provided the evidence to the right people. Speaking of which, you should expect a call from the board of directors soon. I believe they're scheduling an emergency meeting to discuss the company's leadership." "You have no idea who you're dealing with," James threatened. "No, James, you have no idea who you've been dealing with," Marcus corrected. "I build things for a living. That means I understand exactly how to take them apart when they're structurally unsound. Your empire was built on secrets and threats. What happens to a structure when you remove its foundation?" The call ended abruptly. Diana stared at her phone, tears streaming down her face. "What have I done?" "You've taken the first step toward making things right," Marcus answered, still typing in his journal. "It won't be easy, but it's necessary." Within the hour, news began spreading through Seattle's business community. James Wellington had been suspended pending an investigation into allegations of misconduct. Victoria Wellington had called for an emergency board meeting to discuss succession planning. The company's stock price began to fluctuate as rumors circulated. Nathan called with updates from his legal contacts. "The floodgates are opening," he reported. 3 more women have already contacted Victoria's lawyers. The board is in emergency sessions. There's talk of criminal charges if evidence of financial misconduct is found during the audit. Marcus listened, continuing to document everything. He had spent years learning how to design structures that could withstand any storm. Now he was watching one of Seattle's most prominent business figures face a tempest of his own making, and the architect in him knew that structures built on corrupt foundations inevitably fell. Diana remained in his office, seemingly unable to leave the one space where truth was being spoken plainly. "What happens now?" she asked finally. Marcus looked at her, seeing not the confident designer who had asked for an open marriage just 24 hours ago, but someone who was beginning to understand the true cost of her choices. "Now," he said, "we begin the process of rebuilding, but this time on honest foundations." The following days unfolded like an architectural disaster assessment, with Marcus methodically evaluating which parts of his life could be salvaged and which needed to be completely rebuilt. The news of James Wellington's suspension and impending divorce investigation had sent shockwaves through Seattle's business community, but Marcus remained focused on the structural integrity of his own situation. Emma's well-being remained his primary concern. She had spent 3 nights at May's apartment, protected from the initial chaos, but Marcus knew they couldn't shield her forever from the changes coming to their family structure. As an architect, he understood that even the most carefully planned renovations affected everyone living in the house. "We need to tell her something," May advised during their daily check-in call. "She's smart, Marcus. She knows something's wrong. This morning she asked me if you and Diana were getting divorced." Marcus felt his heart constrict. "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that I didn't know for sure, but that both her parents love her very much, and that whatever happens, she'll always be taken care of." May paused. "You need to have a real conversation with her, brother. Soon." Marcus knew she was right. He had spent the morning consulting with Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation, a child psychologist recommended by May, getting advice on how to approach such a difficult conversation with a 10-year-old. Children often blame themselves for their parents' separation, Dr. Chen had warned. "It's crucial to be clear that this situation has nothing to do with her, and that both parents still love her unconditionally." The irony wasn't lost on Marcus that he was approaching his daughter's emotional well-being with the same careful planning he applied to his architectural projects. But some structures were too precious to risk with hasty renovations. Meanwhile, Diana had moved into the guest room permanently, their interactions limited to necessary discussions about Emma and logistics. The woman who had confidently demanded an open marriage just days ago now seemed hollow, stripped of her certainties. The fallout at Wellington Interiors had been swift and merciless. Victoria Wellington had emerged as a force to be reckoned with, wielding her influence and evidence with surgical precision. James had been officially terminated after the emergency board meeting, his company email and access cards deactivated while he was still in the building. Security footage of him being escorted out by private security had already leaked to local business news websites. "The board is launching a full investigation," Nathan reported during their daily strategy session. "They're bringing in an outside firm to audit everything: finances, hiring practices, project allocations. Victoria's lawyers are cooperating with the SEC regarding possible financial improprieties. James Wellington's entire empire is under the microscope." Marcus nodded, adding these details to his ever-growing documentation. "And Diana? Her resignation has been accepted, effective immediately. But Victoria's lawyers have requested she remain available for questioning regarding company practices under James's leadership. They're offering immunity from any potential legal consequences in exchange for her full cooperation." The news about Wellington Interiors had created ripples throughout Seattle's design community. Marcus's phone had been ringing constantly with calls from colleagues and clients, all trying to understand how one of the city's most prestigious firms had imploded so spectacularly. His own firm, Chen Residential Design, had already received 3 calls from former Wellington Interiors clients looking to transfer their projects. Marcus handled each inquiry with professional detachment, neither accepting nor rejecting them outright. "Let's wait until the dust settles," he advised. "Them. Major decisions shouldn't be made in the midst of chaos." It was the same approach he was taking with his marriage. Despite Diana's tearful attempts to discuss reconciliation, Marcus maintained his emotional distance, treating their interactions like project consultations, professional, focused, and documented. "I made a horrible mistake," Diana had pleaded, the night before. "We can fix this, Marcus. We can rebuild." Marcus had looked at her with the same analytical eye he used when assessing damaged structures. "Some things can't be fixed, Diana. Sometimes the damage is too fundamental to the foundation." The metaphor wasn't lost on her. "You're talking about trust." "I made a horrible mistake," Diana had pleaded the night before. "We can fix this, Marcus. We can rebuild." Marcus had looked at her with the same analytical eye he used when assessing damaged structures. "Some things can't be fixed, Diana. Sometimes the damage is too fundamental to the foundation." The metaphor wasn't lost on her. "You're talking about trust." "I'm talking about integrity," he corrected. "Every building I design has to have structural integrity. Remove that and nothing else matters. Not the aesthetics, not the functionality, not the years of planning. Our marriage lost its integrity the moment you chose to deceive me." Diana had fallen silent, perhaps finally understanding that their marriage, like any compromised structure, couldn't simply be patched and painted over. Some damage required complete demolition before reconstruction could begin. Nathan had already drawn up preliminary divorce papers, thorough and equitable. "You're in a strong position," he advised. "Between the affair, her resignation, and her involvement in the Wellington scandal, you could push for more favorable terms." But Marcus shook his head. "I want this to be fair. Emma needs to see both. Her parents handling this with integrity." The word had become his touchstone, the fundamental principle upon which he would rebuild his life. Integrity in his decisions. Integrity in his interactions with Diana. Integrity in his commitment to Emma's well-being. That afternoon, Marcus scheduled a family dinner with Emma and Diana for the following evening. It was time to begin the careful process of explaining to their daughter how their family structure would change. He chose the timing deliberately, early enough in the evening for Emma to process the news, but with enough time before bed for questions and comfort. "We need to present a united front," he told Diana as they planned the conversation. "Whatever our issues, Emma needs to know that both her parents are committed to her happiness and stability." Diana nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I never meant to hurt her." "I know," Marcus replied, his voice gentle but firm, "but intentions don't matter as much as actions. What matters now is how we move forward, how we rebuild something stable for her, even if it looks different than what we had before." As he made these preparations, Marcus reflected on how his professional principles were guiding his personal reconstruction. In architecture, every major renovation began with a thorough assessment of the existing structure, followed by careful planning of the new design. The same principles would apply here: assessment, planning, and methodical reconstruction. The foundation of his family was changing, but Marcus was determined to build something strong and stable from the ruins of what had been lost. It wouldn't be the same structure he had originally designed, but perhaps it could be something equally solid, founded on the unwavering principle of integrity. The day of the Wellington Interiors Board meeting dawned with an atmosphere of barely contained chaos. Marcus had received an unexpected call from Victoria Wellington's lawyers the previous evening, requesting his presence at the proceedings. His detailed documentation of James's pattern of behavior, combined with his firm's recent work with the company, made him a valuable witness to both the company's internal culture and its leaders' misconduct. "You don't have to do this," Diana had said when he mentioned the invitation. She stood in the doorway of his home office, looking smaller somehow without her usual designer wardrobe and confidence. "James will be there. Exactly why I should be there." Marcus replied, selecting his charcoal grey suit, the one he wore for major client presentations. Some conversations need to happen face to face. The Wellington Interiors headquarters occupied 3 floors of a downtown Seattle high-rise, a building Marcus knew intimately, having consulted on its renovation 5 years earlier. The security guard recognized him from his recent work on their office redesign, but this time directed him to the top-floor boardroom rather than the design department. Victoria Wellington was already there when he arrived, cutting an impressive figure in a tailored black suit that radiated authority rather than mourning. She greeted Marcus with a firm handshake and knowing eyes. "Mr. Chen, thank you for coming. I believe your insight will be invaluable today." Her emphasis on the word suggested she understood exactly what kind of ammunition Marcus brought to this meeting. The boardroom filled quickly with lawyers, board members, and key stakeholders. James Wellington arrived last, flanked by 2 attorneys who looked as expensive as they did nervous. He had lost the polished sheen of success that Marcus remembered from their previous encounters, replaced by a barely concealed desperation. Victoria opened the meeting with clinical precision. "We're here to address serious allegations of misconduct, financial impropriety, and abuse of power by James Wellington in his role as CEO of Wellington Interiors." She gestured to a stack of folders being distributed. "The evidence before you includes testimony from multiple employees, financial records showing questionable transactions, and documented patterns of inappropriate behavior." James leaned forward, his voice carrying practiced authority. "These allegations are baseless. A vindictive attack by a wife angry about marital issues, nothing more." "Really?" Victoria's smile was arctic. "Mr. Chen, would you share your observations of Mr. Wellington's leadership style and company culture?" Marcus opened his laptop, his voice carrying the same steady precision he used when presenting architectural plans. "Over the past 3 months, while working on the office redesign project, I documented numerous instances of inappropriate behavior and concerning patterns." He began sharing specific dates, times, and observations, including James's interactions with female employees and the careful way people avoided being alone with him. "This is ridiculous," James interrupted. "You're just angry about your wife. This is personal." "No, James," Marcus replied calmly. "This is professional. Just like the recordings Sarah Mitchell made of your mentoring sessions. Just like the financial records showing company funds used for your private hotel meetings. Just like the pattern of promoting women who cooperated with your advances and sidelining those who didn't." The color drained from James's face as Marcus continued presenting evidence. Each point was documented, time-stamped, and corroborated. The architect's attention to detail, initially employed for project management, had created an airtight case against Wellington's abuse of power. One of James's lawyers whispered something urgent in his ear, but he brushed it off, standing abruptly. "You think you can destroy me?" he demanded, his carefully maintained facade cracking. "I built this company. I made it what it is." "Actually," Victoria cut in smoothly, "my family's investment built this company. You just exploited it for your personal playground, and now you're done. The board won't stand for this," James threatened, looking around the room for support. But he found none. The evidence was too comprehensive, the pattern too clear. "The board already voted," Victoria informed him. "Unanimously. You're terminated, effective immediately. Security is currently clearing out your office. The locks have been changed, your access revoked, and your company accounts frozen pending the completion of our audit." James lunged forward, his composure completely shattered. "You can't do this to me. I'll fight it. I'll take this company apart piece by piece before I let you." "Mr. Wellington," Marcus interrupted, his voice cutting through the tirade, "you should know that everything you're saying is being recorded. Again, your threats against the company. We'll make interesting evidence in the criminal investigation. The fight seemed to drain out of James all at once. He slumped back in his chair, suddenly looking older and smaller. "You planned this," he said to Victoria. "All of it. You've been planning this for years." "No, James. You planned it. Every inappropriate advance, every abuse of power, every misused company fund. Those were your choices. I just documented them, waiting for the right moment. Thank you, Diana Chen, for providing that moment." The mention of Diana's name caused James to turn to Marcus. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching my life fall apart?" Marcus met his gaze steadily. "I take no pleasure in this, James, but I do believe in consequences. You didn't just try to destroy my marriage. You've been destroying lives and careers for years. It ends today." Victoria nodded to security, who had appeared discreetly at the boardroom door. "Please escort Mr. Wellington out. His lawyers can contact us through appropriate channels from now on." As James was led away, still protesting, Victoria turned to Marcus. "Thank you for your help in exposing this. I know it couldn't have been easy, given the personal nature of some of the evidence." Marcus gathered his materials with methodical care. "In architecture, we have a saying. The integrity of a structure depends on every element being honest about the load it carries. Your husband's empire was built on lies. It was bound to collapse eventually." The meeting concluded with discussions of transition plans and damage control strategies. Marcus provided copies of all his documentation to Victoria's legal team, then headed for the elevator. As he reached the lobby, his phone buzzed with a text from Diana. "Is it over?" He typed a simple reply. "Yes, the demolition is complete. Time to start rebuilding." Walking to his car, Marcus reflected on how the professional and personal had intertwined in this confrontation. His architect's eye for detail and commitment to structural integrity had helped expose a different kind of structural failure, one of character and ethics. Now, like any major demolition, the focus would shift to clearing the debris and preparing for new construction. News of James Wellington's dramatic fall from grace spread through Seattle's business community like a seismic wave, triggering aftershocks that no one had fully anticipated. Marcus watched the cascade of consequences unfold with the same analytical eye he used when studying how stress in one structural element affected an entire building. Within days of the board meeting, local business publications began running exposés on Wellington Interior's toxic culture. Former employees, emboldened by James's removal, came forward with their own stories. The carefully constructed image of one of Seattle's most prestigious design firms crumbled under the weight of revealed truth. Diana, still living in their guest room, seemed to age years in mere days as she watched her professional reputation become collateral damage in the collapse. One morning, she sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through industry news on her tablet. "They're calling it Design's Me Too moment," she said, her voice hollow. "Every major firm in the city is reviewing their harassment policies. HR departments are in overdrive. And my name is everywhere." Marcus looked up from his own work. "You could make a statement, tell your side of the story." "What side?" Diana laughed bitterly. "That I was so desperate for professional advancement that I became complicit in James's pattern of exploitation. That I was willing to destroy my marriage and risk my daughter's happiness for a man who turned out to be exactly what everyone warned me about." "The truth," Marcus suggested quietly, "that you made mistakes, but you also helped expose a predator who had been abusing his power for years." Before Diana could respond, Marcus's phone rang. It was Nathan, his voice carrying the urgent tone of breaking news. "Turn on King 5, right now." Marcus switched on the kitchen television, tuning to the local news station. James Wellington's face filled the screen, but not in his usual polished executive pose. This was a mugshot. Breaking news in the Wellington interior scandal, the anchor announced. CEO James Wellington has been arrested on multiple charges, including embezzlement, fraud, and sexual harassment. Sources say the SEC has uncovered evidence of systematic financial misconduct spanning several years. Diana's tablet clattered to the counter. Arrested? But how? The forensic audit, Marcus explained, already typing notes in his documentation. File. Victoria's lawyers must have found something significant enough to warrant criminal charges. Nathan's voice crackled through the speaker. It's worse than that. The SEC investigation revealed he was running a complex scheme, inflating project costs, skimming from client payments, using company funds for personal expenses. They're estimating millions in fraudulent transactions. The news continued to detail the charges, including interviews with former employees and financial experts. James Wellington, the man who had seemed untouchable just weeks ago, was facing serious prison time. There's more, Nathan added. Victoria's lawyers want to talk to Diana again. They think she might have unknowingly been used to facilitate some of the financial fraud through her project management role. Diana's face went pale. I signed off on all his project budgets. Oh God, Marcus, am I going to be arrested too? No, Marcus assured her, his voice steady. That's why Victoria's lawyers want to talk to you. They're building their case against James, and your cooperation could help ensure you're seen as a witness rather than an accomplice. The domino effect continued throughout the day. Wellington Interior's stock plummeted as investors fled. Major clients began pulling their projects. The board announced an emergency restructuring, with Victoria Wellington stepping in as interim CEO. Marcus's phone buzzed constantly with calls from industry colleagues seeking his insight. As one of the last people to work closely with the firm before its implosion, his perspective was suddenly in high demand. I keep thinking about all the red flags I ignored, Diana said that evening, as they sat in Marcus's home office reviewing documentation for Victoria's lawyers. The way he insisted on handling certain client payments personally, the project budgets that never quite added up. I was so caught up in the attention, the flattery, I became willing to overlook things I should have questioned. Marcus nodded, remembering his own architectural training about the importance of questioning anything that didn't align with established principles. That's how people like James operate. They make you complicit in small compromises until you're too entangled to speak up about the bigger ones. The design community is running scared, Diana continued. Every firm is worried they'll be next under the microscope. It's like James's arrest broke some unspoken code of silence about how things really operate in this industry. She wasn't wrong. Marcus had already received calls from several architecture firms asking him to review their internal policies and project management procedures. His reputation for integrity, combined with his role in exposing Wellington's misconduct, had ironically positioned him as an expert in ethical business practices. Sometimes it takes a structural failure to expose systemic weaknesses, Marcus observed, falling back on architectural metaphors. The question is whether the industry will learn from this and build something better, or just apply cosmetic fixes to deep-rooted problems. Later that night, after Diana had retired to the guest room, Marcus sat in his office updating his journal. The entry for the day read like a case study in how quickly apparently solid structures could collapse when their foundation was corrupted. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria Wellington. "Thank you for your help in exposing the truth. The board has asked me to oversee a complete reorganization of the company. Would you be interested in consulting on more than just the office redesign?" Marcus stared at the message, understanding its implications. Victoria was offering him a chance to help rebuild Wellington interiors from the ground up, to transform it from a symbol of corruption into a model of ethical business practices. Before he could respond, another text came through, this one from May. Emma's asking to come home. She says she misses her own bed. Are you and Diana ready? The two messages, arriving almost simultaneously, reminded Marcus that some reconstruction projects were more important than others. He needed to focus on rebuilding his daughter's sense of security before he could consider taking on the renovation of an entire company. He replied to Victoria first. Thank you for the offer. Let me think about it. Then to May. Bring her home. Tomorrow. It's time to start rebuilding our new normal. The demolition phase was complete. Now came the challenging work of reconstruction, not just of physical spaces and business practices, but of trust, family bonds, and personal integrity. As an architect, Marcus knew that the most crucial phase of any rebuilding project was the foundation. Everything else would depend on how well they laid those first new stones. Marcus had always viewed major life changes through the lens of his profession, and the resolution of the Wellington scandal proved no different. Like any successful construction project, it required careful planning, precise timing, and attention to every detail. Emma's return home marked the beginning of their family's reconstruction phase. Marcus and Diana had prepared carefully for this moment, consulting with Dr. Chen about the best way to explain their new family dynamics to their perceptive 10-year-old. I think I already know, Emma said quietly, sitting between them on the living room sofa. You're getting divorced, aren't you? Marcus exchanged a glance with Diana before answering. Yes, sweetheart. But some things will never change, like how much we both love you. Is it because of Mr. Wellington? Emma asked, her insight catching them both off guard. I heard Aunt May talking about him being arrested. She didn't know I was awake. Diana's sharp intake of breath was audible. Emma, honey, what happened with Mr. Wellington was complicated, but it's not something you need to worry about. But he's why Mom's not working anymore, right? And why she's sleeping in the guest room. Marcus marveled at his daughter's ability to piece together the puzzle from fragments of overheard conversations and observed changes. Like any good architect, she had constructed her understanding from available evidence. The problems between your mother and me are our responsibility, Marcus explained carefully. What happened with Mr. Wellington showed us that we need to make some changes in our family structure, but these changes don't change how much we love you. Emma considered this with the same serious expression she wore when working on difficult math problems. Will I have to choose who to live with? No, Diana answered quickly. Your father and I have already discussed this. We're going to have joint custody, which means you'll spend time with both of us, and we'll still do things together as a family sometimes, like your art shows and school events. Marcus watched his daughter process this information, remembering Dr. Chen's advice about being honest while maintaining age-appropriate boundaries. Your mum and I are working on building something new, a different kind of family structure that will still be strong and stable, just arranged differently. Emma nodded slowly, like when you redesign a house to make it better, even though it looks different. Marcus smiled at her use of architectural terminology. Exactly like that. The foundation, our love for you, stays the same. We're just reorganizing the rest of the structure. The conversation continued as Emma asked questions about practical matters. Would she keep her room? Could she still have her friends over? Would she still see Aunt May regularly? Marcus and Diana answered each query with united certainty, their shared commitment to Emma's well-being, providing common ground in their otherwise fractured relationship. Meanwhile, the professional aftermath of James Wellington's arrest continued to reshape Seattle's design community. Victoria Wellington had emerged as a powerful force for change, implementing sweeping reforms at Wellington Interiors while cooperating fully with investigators. Nathan called with regular updates about the criminal case. "They're offering Diana immunity in exchange for her testimony," he reported. "The prosecutors want to establish a pattern of how James used professional relationships to facilitate both his personal misconduct and financial fraud." Diana agreed to cooperate, spending long hours with investigators detailing her involvement with James and the company. Marcus supported her decision, recognizing that facing the truth was the first step toward genuine reconstruction. "I keep thinking about all the other women," Diana confided one evening, after returning from a meeting with prosecutors. "How many careers he damaged. How many lives he affected. I was just the last in a long line, wasn't I?" "But you were the one who helped stop it," Marcus reminded her. "Your testimony, combined with Victoria's evidence, means he can't hurt anyone else." The criminal case against James Wellington grew stronger as more evidence emerged. The SEC investigation revealed a complex web of financial misconduct, with client funds being diverted through a network of shell companies. James had apparently been running his own private empire within the company structure, using his position to enrich himself while manipulating those around him. Victoria's offer for Marcus to consult on the company's reorganization remained open. After careful consideration, he agreed to take on a limited role, focusing specifically on creating new project management systems that would prevent future financial manipulation. "We need someone with both design expertise and unquestionable integrity," Victoria explained during their first consultation. "Your handling of the scandal proved you have both." Marcus approached the company's reconstruction with the same methodical care he applied to his architectural projects. He designed new approval processes, implemented transparent budget tracking systems, and established clear lines of accountability. At home, the reconstruction of their family structure progressed. Slowly but steadily, Diana began looking for a new place to live, something close enough to maintain Emma's routine, but separate enough to establish clear boundaries. Marcus helped her evaluate properties, applying his architectural expertise to ensure she found something suitable for their shared custody arrangement. "What about this one?" Diana asked, showing him a listing for a craftsman house just 10 blocks from their home. "It's within walking distance of Emma's school, and it has a room that could be perfect for her art projects." Marcus studied the listing with professional interest. "The bones look good. Want me to come look at it with you? I can check for any structural issues." These moments of cooperation, focused on Emma's well-being, helped establish a new pattern of interaction between them. While their marriage was over, their commitment to being good parents provided a framework for their ongoing relationship. Emma adapted to the changes with remarkable resilience, though she had occasional moments of struggle. One night, she crawled into Marcus's bed during a thunderstorm, something she hadn't done in years. "Dad," she whispered, "are you sure everything's going to be okay?" Marcus held her close, reminded of how architectural designs had to account for both everyday use and occasional storms. "Yes, sweetheart, sometimes the strongest structures are built after something breaks. We just have to be patient while we're rebuilding." The metaphor seemed to comfort her, and soon her breathing steadied into sleep. Marcus lay awake, thinking about how reconstruction wasn't just about replacing what was lost, but about building something new that could withstand future storms. As the criminal case against James Wellington moved toward trial, the wider impacts of his downfall continued to reshape Seattle's professional landscape. Other firms began implementing stricter oversight policies, and industry organizations launched initiatives to address systemic issues of harassment and financial accountability. Marcus observed these changes with cautious optimism, knowing that true structural change required more than just new policies and procedures. It required a fundamental shift in foundations, both professional and personal. The resolution phase was far from complete, but the framework for something new and potentially stronger was taking shape. Like any good architect, Marcus knew that the most durable structures were often built on the lessons learned from previous failures. 6 months after James Wellington's arrest, the landscape of both Marcus's personal and professional life had transformed completely. Like any major reconstruction project, the changes revealed themselves gradually, each new development adding to the emerging structure of his reformed life. The criminal trial against James Wellington had begun, drawing media attention and causing further ripples through Seattle's business community. Diana's testimony, delivered with quiet dignity, helped establish the pattern of manipulation and fraud that had characterized James's leadership. Marcus attended the trial's opening day, not out of vindictiveness, but to demonstrate support for all the women who had found the courage to come forward. James, once the epitome of corporate success, looked diminished in his courtroom appearance. His designer suits replaced by standard business attire, his commanding presence reduced to defensive posturing. The prosecution's opening statements painted a damning picture of systematic abuse of power and financial manipulation. The defendant didn't just betray his company, the prosecutor declared. He betrayed every employee who trusted him, every client who believed in his integrity, and every investor who relied on his honesty. This case is about more than money. It's about the abuse of trust. Victoria Wellington's testimony proved particularly devastating. She presented years of meticulously gathered evidence, demonstrating how James had used his position to create a culture of fear and compliance while systematically embezzling company funds. Marcus's own involvement with Wellington Interiors had evolved in unexpected ways. His initial consulting role in redesigning their project management systems had expanded into a broader advisory position, helping Victoria implement comprehensive reforms throughout the company. "We're not just fixing what James broke," Victoria explained during a board meeting. "We're building something entirely new, a company culture based on transparency, accountability, and genuine respect for every employee." At home, the reconstruction of family life progressed steadily. Diana had moved into the craftsman house Marcus had helped her evaluate, and they had established a smooth, co-parenting routine that put Emma's needs first. Their daughter split her time between both homes, each now equipped with an art space, where she could continue developing her creative talents. Emma's resilience continued to amaze both her parents. She had adapted to the new arrangement with remarkable grace, even finding ways to appreciate the unique aspects of having two distinct home environments. "Dad's house is better for architectural drawings," she explained matter-of-factly one day, "but Mom's new art room has the best light for painting." The professional fallout from the Wellington scandal had actually opened new opportunities for Marcus's firm. His reputation for integrity, combined with his role in exposing corporate misconduct, attracted clients who prioritized ethical business practices. Chen Residential Design became known not just for innovative architecture, but for transparent project management and principled leadership. Diana, after months of soul-searching and therapy, had begun to rebuild her own career, but in an unexpected direction. Her experience had led her to recognize the need for reform in the design industry. She started consulting with professional organizations, helping develop guidelines for preventing harassment and exploitation in creative fields. "I can't undo what happened," she told Marcus during one of their co-parenting discussions. "But I can help make sure it doesn't happen to others." Their relationship, while irreparably changed, had evolved into something neither of them had expected, a partnership based on mutual respect and shared commitment to their daughter's well-being. The anger and betrayal had gradually been replaced by a quiet understanding that sometimes destruction was necessary for genuine growth. Nathan, who'd been instrumental in navigating the legal aspects of both the divorce and the Wellington case, observed this transformation with approval. "You've both managed to build something positive from the ruins," he commented. "That's rare in these situations." Marcus viewed these changes through his architect's lens, recognizing that the strongest structures often emerge from careful reconstruction rather than hasty repair. The foundation of his new life, while different from what he had originally planned, was proving more solid than he had imagined possible in the immediate aftermath of Diana's betrayal. One evening, as he sat in his home office reviewing plans for a new sustainable housing project, Emma wandered in with her sketchbook. "Dad," she asked, settling into her usual spot by his drafting table, "are you and Mom happier now?" Marcus considered the question carefully, appreciating his daughter's directness. "I think we're both learning to build something new," he answered honestly. "Sometimes happiness looks different than what we expected." Emma nodded, returning to her drawing, "Like when you have to change a design because the original plan doesn't work anymore." "Exactly like that," Marcus smiled, once again struck by how naturally she applied architectural principles to life's challenges. The reconstruction of their lives continued, each day adding new elements to the emerging structure, while the foundation had been